Allô, allô? C'est parfait. Allô, allô?
Merci.
Allô, allô?
Merci. Je vais perdre son temps de notes. Du coup, c'est toi qui modères?
Ouais, j'ai pu décharger les Jean-Christophe, Cécile.
Tu dis deux lignes, hein. C'est pas la peine de tout dire à chaque fois. T'as quoi sur moi?
Alors j'ai Ecology and Conservation Science for Sustainable Sea,
Voilà, tu dis
Vice
juste,
President for International
vice
Affairs.
présidente et puis head of the lab
J'ai reçu a Master
aussi.
Degree of Biochemistry and
Non, ça c'est pas la
PhD.
peine de dire tout ça.
Non.
L'autre fois, Lisa, elle avait dit, je te dis,
She's mainly working on ecology of marine communities. She's
voilà.
developing new tools for biodiversity monitoring.
Ça, je
She's
peux dire.
also um, she's also interested in sustainable fishing and marine community management. She obtained several grants, including the prestigious.
Après tout ça, tu peux le. C'est pas la peine.
She has coordinated several training tracks as the vice president of international. Okay.
Déjà, ça c'est beaucoup mieux.
Voilà, et Jean-Christophe et Vincent. D'accord.
Et du coup, on est que trois.
Bah, j'espère que Jenny va arriver. Okay, can we start? Okay. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the panel Sustainable Water and Marine Resources, the Challenges of Climate and Biodiversity Crisis. Freshwater ecosystems are among the most degraded and threatened ecosystems at the global scale. Given the likelihood that demand for available water resources worldwide will increase in the future, water ecosystem services need to be protected. In order for humans to live, they need access to fresh water. While nearly 70% of the Earth's surface is water, most of it is salt water, which humans cannot drink. Only a small percentage, about 3%, is fresh water. Of this, about 69% is currently frozen as ice caps and glaciers, while another 30% is held underground in the soil or in rock. This means that only 1% of the world's fresh water, or 0.003% of the world's total water, is surface water that humans can access to drink. The small amount of potable water makes its conservation incredibly important so that water shortage already occurring in some regions do not spread any further. If they do, this may lead to conflict over the right to use this water. There are many ways in which humans can affect access to fresh water. For example, humans can pollute bodies or water, thereby making them undrinkable. In some cases, they make physical change to the lands by building over wetlands or damming up rivers. While wealthy countries can afford to make the investment necessary to make sure their residents have access to fresh water, poorer countries often cannot. This means that poorer countries are at greater risk of devastating drought, which can lead both to dehydration and starvation as the country is unable to water its crop. Drought can also have a negative impact on the biodiversity of a region. Around the world, more than 125,000 animal species live entirely in freshwater habitats, including 15,000 species of fish, 4,000 species of amphibian, and 5,000 species of mollusks such as clams and oysters. Millions of these other species, including humans, depend on fresh water to drink. The world's population has doubled in the last 50 years. Humanity's increasing water consumption represents a growing threat to biodiversity. I wish to welcome Monsef Sian, Cécile Saboureau, and Jean-Christophe Martin on this panel. I'm going to start with a presentation of Cécile Saboureau. Cécile Saboureau is an ecologist and conservationist science for sustainable sea. She is vice president for international affairs at Université Côte d'Azur since its creation in January 2020, and she's a professor of biology in the Life Credit School. She's mainly working on ecology of marine communities, means ecophysiology, environmental genomic, chemical ecology. She's developing new tools for biodiversity monitoring, and she's also interested in sustainable fishing and marine protected area. Very welcome, Cécile. Then we have Monsef Sian, who is engineer. He's an international independent consultant in project development and international procurement with 40 years experience in the engineering sector. Mr. Siani is a member of the Moroccan Economic, Social and Environmental Council, member of UCESA board and vice president of FCIC, Federation of Consultants from Islamic Countries. He is past vice president of FIDIC, International Federation of Consulting Engineers, past president of the Moroccan Federation of Consulting and Engineering, and former CEO of SEED, a multidisciplinary engineering firm operating in Africa and in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. Zian, to be here. And then we have Professor Jean-Christophe Martin. He's a professor of international European law. He mainly works on legal questions relating to peace and security, law of the sea, and sustainable development. He is the director of the Institute for Peace and Development of Université Côte d'Azur since 2015, and he holds a UNESCO Chair Peace and Development through Law since 2022. He has also played a key role in the internationalization of the Université Côte d'Azur from 2012 to 2019 in quality of Vice President for International Affairs. Relying on both his experience and his expertise in international law relations, he is interested in scientific diplomacy issues, including the contribution of universities to global peace and development. Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe Martin. So I'm going to give the floor now to Cécile Saboureau. Please, Cécile.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. So it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this panel. And because I am the marine scientist people, so we talk about marine water and marine resources. And today we'll talk about nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation. So next slide, please. So first I would like to introduce the concept of One Health. So it's based on both ocean health and human health. So that means that the ocean and human societies are strongly interconnected. So that means that, for example, humans benefit from numerous services provided by the ocean. For example, human health, well-being, and wealth also strongly depend on healthy oceans. However, we know that various human activities have strongly impacts on the marine environment, and it's necessary to call for a more sustainable use of oceans. So next slide, please. So, for example, the coastal ecosystems are providing a lot of services to humans. For example, they are sequestering carbon, and they provide climate mitigation, and they also enhance coastal protection through ecosystem engineering species, and they are part of nutrient cycling. And of course, they also enhance biodiversity, and they keep habitats. And regarding humans, they provide social and cultural activities, for example, for tourism or cultural heritage. And they also provide, of course, socio-economic services. And regarding, so next slide, please. Regarding the marine protected areas, so they are very useful nature-based solutions. And for example, marine protected areas may enhance carbon sequestration. They also enhance coastal protection, and they enhance, of course, biodiversity and biomass. And they also can limit disease transmission, and they limit species invasions. So it's very helpful to keep this biodiversity and the marine protected areas. And of course, they can enhance reproductive capacity of marine organisms. They provide, for example, nurseries for juvenile, for fishes. And at the end, they finally enhance fishers' catches just outside MPAs, of course, because the fishers are allowed to fish inside MPAs. And finally, they enhance fishers' income, and they provide food for people. So next slide, please. So it's really important to keep and to create these marine protected areas. And the efficiency, in fact, of the effectiveness of marine protected areas depends on the level of protection. And you can see here on this picture that if you are able to keep the marine protected areas fully protected, so that means that there is no activity allowed in that area, then you will get a lot more diversity and biomass of marine organisms. And then, of course, the effectiveness of these MPAs will be very high. So, next slide, please. Yeah. So to create marine protected areas, so we need to take a social ecological systems approach. So that means that we need to involve local communities and stakeholders at every stage. And this is really, really important to maintain this cooperation. And then you can, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So that means that we have to work in transdisciplinary approaches. And we have to work with, for example, biologists, but also economists, lawyers, and social scientists. And on this picture, you can see that everything is very intricately interconnected. So you have the ocean and human health in one part, and in the other part you have the ocean health operationalization. And then you have to manage, you have to take action to recovery, to produce recovery. And this active intervention have to be guided by scientists. Next slide, please. And to do this transdisciplinary framework, then at Université Côte d'Azur, we have created what we have called the Federative Research Institute for Marine Resources. And we gathered all people involved in this marine resources studies from different labs, and they are working together to be able to make these transdisciplinary approaches. Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cécile. I'm going to make, I was writing some questions. I'm going to make all the questions after. Now, I wish to give the floor to Mr. Sian. Please, Mr. Sian.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I would like, through my presentation without slides, I'm sorry for that, to share with you some information and some thoughts about the water sector in Morocco. And to do that, I choose to focus on 4 points. First, to give you some figures on the water sector in Morocco. Second, to tell you how this sector has been affected by climate change. Third point, to give you also some figures about the available water resources at the present time in Morocco, because we are living a very, very severe drought at the moment. And finally, I will show you the main challenges of this sector for the future in Morocco. So speaking about the water sector in Morocco, we can characterize it by 3 points. First, Morocco is what we call situated in a stress zone, water stress zone in the world. So hydric stress situation, as the annual affordable water resources does not exceed 600 cubic meter per habitant and per year. This is what we have as affordable water for the whole population. Second figure is that we have irregular geographic distribution of water. For example, the annual rainfall in the north of Morocco is 800 millimeters, while in the south it is only 100 millimeters. And the result of that is that 50% of the total rainfall is concentrated on 7% of the territory, of the Moroccan territory. So you can imagine all the challenges we have to transfer water from one region to another. And third figure is that we have an irregular rainfall quantities from one year to another. And this one figure to show that is that the whole rainfall we have can go from 4 billion cubic meter to 50 billion cubic meter. So a very, very huge variety from one year to another, which of course influence the way we manage water. The second point is some flashes about how this sector has been affected by climate change these last decades. First thing is we have demonstrated now that the average waterfall has fallen by 40% these last 50 years. If during the spring period in the year, and in the winter period, it fell by 25% these 50 years. Second figure is that the annual surface water inflow average decreased from 18 billion cubic meter to 14 billion cubic meter. That's a reduction of 24% during these 50 years. And third figure is, of course, the increase of the temperature. And we calculated in Morocco that in these last 50 years, temperature increased by 0.3 degrees, and we are expecting that this increase will be of 1 degree in 2050 and 1.5 degree in 2080. And these are optimistic scenarios, unfortunately. So, of course, speaking about water, one of the consequences of the rise of the temperature is one and not all the consequences, is the evaporation, because Morocco has constructed many large dams. I will speak about it later. But all these reservoirs are now being affected by the increase of evaporation. The third point I would like to share with you is about the available water resource at the present time. As I said, we have been coping with 3 years drought. We are on the consecutive 3 years drought. And although Morocco has been investing a lot of money on construction dams, we have constructed these 30 years, we have constructed 150 large dams and 140 small and medium dams. But at the present time, their fill rate is only 25%. But because the capacity of all these dams is approximately 16 billion cubic meter, but we have only in all these reservoirs 4 billion cubic meters. Second thing about the availability of water at the present time is groundwater aquifers level. This level has been going down because we have overexploited groundwater, and the studies showed that we extract every year 4 billion cubic meter, while this aquifer does stand only 3 billion cubic meter. So we don't succeed to renew the storage of this aquifer. And third point is that we have been forced to now start using desalination. Morocco has about 4,000 kilometers of coast, Mediterranean and Atlantic, and we have constructed 9 large desalination, seawater desalination plants of a total production capacity of 150 billion cubic meter per year. But this is not an easy solution for Morocco, because Morocco is an Arab country, but we don't have oil. It can be strange, but it is like that. But so Morocco imports all its energy, and desalination means using energy. And now there is the idea is all the future desalination plants will use renewable energy, meaning solar or wind energy. So the challenge now is to provide water to 37 million inhabitants. This is the population in Morocco. And also, I didn't mention this before, and also to irrigate 2 million hectares, equipped hectares, because agriculture in Morocco is very, very important. It is the main social sector, let me say that this way. And not only we have been investing a lot of money in agriculture, but we are in the future continuing to develop this sector. I will finish my presentation by mentioning the main challenges of the Moroccan sector in the future. Of course, all what I said, the figures, the problems, the scarcity, has led Morocco to settle a national integrated water resource management. Of course, since approximately 15 years. And the main challenges are first, of course, to secure water supply to the population and to the industry. Second, to provide water to irrigation, as I mentioned, not only for the 2 million hectares, but also for the future developments. And at the same time, to address the following challenges. To have a sustainable way of managing groundwater resources, because we are now realizing that these aquifers are not being renewed, the capacity is not being renewed. We are trying to avoid water resource pollution, especially by domestic and industrial used water discharges. We have been investing a lot of money in this field. Morocco has constructed in only 10 years 200 used water treatment plants in different areas of the country. And we are developing the reuse of this water, especially to irrigate green parks, green spaces. And you may know that Morocco has focused on tourism since a long time ago. And one of the niches we are developing is golf. So we have a lot of golf courses around the country. And since many years, all these golf courses are irrigated with reused water from these plants I mentioned before. We are also working on awareness campaigns to reduce individual consumption of water, of course. We are also have a large program of leakage detection and reparation in water distribution networks in cities and also in the countryside. And I will finish by saying that although energy is expensive now, is expensive in Morocco, we are trying to develop more desalination plants using renewable energy. And even the largest city in Morocco, which is Casablanca, will be fed by desalination in the future, next years, because next year we will start the construction of a huge desalination plant of a capacity of 300 billion cubic meter per year to provide water to the city, which is 4 million inhabitants. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Monsef. Now I'm giving the floor to Professor Jean-Christophe Martin.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I would like to warmly thank the Mary Foundation for organizing this panel about sustainable water and resources. Thank you for inviting me in order to give a presentation about international law. My contribution is entitled The Water Security Paradigm, towards a multi-dimensional perspective in international law. Indeed, one of the aspects of the panel was to present the multi-dimensional, the holistic perspectives, and I will organize my presentation in two parts. Next slide. Yes, that's correct. First part will be dedicated to an overview of what is international law about when it comes to fresh water, and I will explain that international law, the international legal framework, is fragmented, and it raises questions about its adequacy in order to face the challenges that I've raised in the context of climate change mainly. Then in the second part, I will try to propose a solution to this fragmentation in order to encompass in a global approach, a multi-dimensional perspective, all the issues relating to fresh water in international law. First part, then, the fragmentation of international law relating to fresh water. To be as simple as possible, I would say that many branches of international law incorporate water, concern water. It exists as an international water law, which relates mainly to transboundary water courses, international lakes, but other branches are also relevant when it comes to fresh water, and I will cite the international environmental law, of course, international human rights law, and international humanitarian law, which applies in the context of armed conflicts. First of all, international water law. It is to say that it has not been elaborated in the context of climate change. Two main conventions, two main treaties have been adopted in 1992 and 1997, which aims to foster cooperation and avoid conflicts between states. The UN Water Courses Convention adopted in 1997, the UNESCO Water Convention of 1992. So why are they not connected to climate change challenges, since they have been adopted after the Rio summit? The negotiation have started 2 decades ago, and so it was not relevant to include at that time the challenges of climate change in those conventions. So 2 global treaties, but also many river basin agreements which focus on quantitative sharing of water and dispute settlement mechanisms. Just an overlook at the 2 global conventions, which are complementary. So they create a kind of robust, solid framework, legal framework, and we can find common key principles in both texts. The obligation to prevent transboundary impact and significant harm, the so-called no-harm rule, which is about protecting water ecosystems and preventing harm to other states, which are also riparian states of the same common water course. Then the equitable and reasonable utilization of those water courses, the state responsibility and liability, the principle, which is a central one, the principle of cooperation, and then the principle of pacific settlement of disputes. In addition, I would add that a protocol has been adopted, which is, oh, sorry. That's the good one. You're great. A protocol has been adopted in order to complete the UNESCO Convention, and this one is really interesting, since it is the first international agreement adopted specifically to attain an adequate supply of safe drinking water and adequate sanitation for everyone. So the aim of this very protocol is to protect water used as a source of drinking water and sanitation. It entered in force in 2005, but only 27 states have ratified this convention. This is a shame, since it is the only international binding text that create obligation to provide access to water and sanitation for all. You can take a look and read two of the central provisions of this agreement. So they really focus on the right to water, to put it simply. They create a real framework for the translation of the human right to water and sanitation into practice. But as you can see, and I have underlined those parts of the articles, the wording is very soft, should be provided. So this is also a limit. So to sum up, those treaties create a strong basis, but they are also limited. The participation is limited. There is a modest number of states parties, 37 for the UN Convention, 47 for the UNESCO Convention, whereas about 150 countries are concerned by transboundary water courses, are riparian states of transboundary water course. And those conventions are also limited in scope, and through the principles I have displayed, we can see that they are not that adapted to the current challenges concerning climate change. Soft law has been adopted too in order to complete this legal framework. This is important, but I have to recall that these rules, which are good quality ones, are not binding. So states are free to respect or not these soft rules. Other branches of international law have also been developed that could be interesting in order to address issues concerning fresh water. International environmental law, some conventions have been specifically adopted. For instance, the 1971 Ramsar Convention dedicated to wetlands. General principles of international environmental law are also applicable. I add that international human rights law is also really relevant. A right to water has been adopted by the United Nations General Assembly, has been promoted. Other human rights are also at stake, for instance, the right to life, the right to dignity, the right to health, which are concerned but indirectly. So what is the solution to this fragmentation? We create difficulties since the international conventions are about, let's say, an horizontal dimension concerning the relations between states and the rights and obligations of states concerning other states, and a more vertical dimension which concern the protection of population and the realization of a right for those population to water. In my opinion, there is a conceptual solution which is named the water security approach, which aims to create a multidimensional paradigm for addressing climate change. Water security is an interesting concept since it leads to cross-fertilization between relevant branches of international law, creates an overarching approach linking international law to climate change, and is also a key to adaptation of laws, but policies, priorities as well to climate change. Indeed, the concept of security is to be understood in this very context, in a modern approach, under a modern approach. The traditional concept of security relates to interstate relations, relate to state security, territories security, under, let's say, a military approach. And we promote now, the idea has been launched 2 decades ago, but it's slowly growing. We are promoting a human security approach, let's say a conception of security issues at the level not only of states but also of communities, of individuals. And for instance, under this approach, the UN Water has adopted in 2013 a definition of water security. You can, oh, sorry. Next slide, please. Yes. Here is the definition of water security under this human security approach. And UNESCO, for instance, has also asserted that the concept of water security has served to articulate concern about issues such as reliability, quality, quantity, safe and equitable access, and environmental provisioning of water supplies. So this concept of water security under this human security approach permits a genuine holistic vision with three main dimensions. It encompasses cooperation between states to prevent international conflicts about water resources, but also it encompasses access to water for individuals and environmental sustainability. So this is a global approach that permits to create links, relations between all the different branches of international law which are relevant to address issues concerning fresh water. It strengthens, next slide please, it strengthens the idea of interdependence instead of independence of states. It reinforces the duty to cooperate in peaceful management of shared transportable water resources. It also supports the human right to water and sanitation, upgrading its political and legal authority, and it also implies appropriate risk assessment and management strategies at the international, regional, but also national, domestic, let's say, levels. Next slide. This is my last slide, just to explain that international law is also about, not only about regulation of the behaviors of states, let's say, but also organizing the governance. And I would like to raise this question of the governance of fresh water on Earth. For instance, the World Water Forum in 2020, the ministerial declaration stated or called the UN Secretary General to further strengthen the coordination and coherence of activities on water issues within the UN system. This is an example. Since we have a fragmentation of international law, international normative spaces, let's say, then it leads to a fragmentation of governance because different people, different institutions, different organs are in charge of each segment, each branch. And so we have to think about the governance issues concerning water security, which would be the right institution to manage worldwide these issues of water security. Is the UN Security Council, for instance, the right institution? It could be, because it has a lot of powers, but there is a lack of legitimacy, and its approach under a traditional security approach does not matches with the issues. There is another option to create an ad hoc, one more, an ad hoc institution which would be empowered to ensure water security in a multi-dimensional perspective. We already have UN Water, the World Water Forum, etc., but they are not sufficient in order to get a good governance. So this is an open question, and I will be more than happy to answer to questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe, for this very interesting presentation. So I want to text your last. This is us this time? No, it's not us? Oh my God. Well, so I want to take your last presentation to make a question. How far are we from a new governance? Maybe not this one from the UN. We have currently the FAO. We have several institutions. And I came from a country where the constitution said that we have the private right to have law. So the law is even not a public right, you know? So we are that far of this kind of concept. And actually, and currently, it has been a very huge social crisis 2 years ago, and it started because of that. because of the climate changes in South America, in Chile in particular, and because people don't have the right of, of water, even if each one has access to the water, but the concept wasn't acceptable. So how far are we from a new kind of governance?
I think that we are quite far from a new, very original kind of governance. To say what I think, there are many interesting things and many institutions that have been created in order to coordinate, articulate different aspects. For example, UN Water works in this direction, but it is not empowered with a lot of capacities. Its prerogatives are quite limited. This is kind of forum, let's say, but I think that we need, in order to face the huge challenges concerning the right to water in the coming decades, we need a strong institution which would be able to have this broad view of all the different dimensions. To put it simply, I would say 3 different dimensions. The relations between states and the problem of potential conflicts relating to the use, the utilization, the reasonable or not utilization of fresh water courses, the protection of peoples, communities, people and individuals through a genuine and efficient right to water. And we are not done with this challenge. And there are many different institutions that deal with this potential right, but which is not that efficient. So, and third dimension, the protection, the ecosystemic protection, the protection of environment related to water courses, fresh water, I mean.
Exactly.
So something is still missing, and we will not get a very original governance framework in the coming years, I would say.
Thank you. And Monsef, I was wondering, how does Morocco seek to consolidate the industrial perspective that often use a lot of freshwater resources or strategic water resources, and at the same time the necessary sustainability of these resources? I was wondering how Morocco tried to combine the sustainability of these resources and the use that we imply from the industry.
Well, we are working on different directions, of course. The main one is to improve what I called before the integrated water resource management. This has been settled 10 years ago, but we still need to improve it. And one way we are, I think in next year we will be applying this, is to create a national agency of water. Why? Because at the present time, water is managed by a ministry called Ministry of Equipment and Water. But unfortunately, and I think it is the case in many countries, at least in developing countries, ministries work in a silo approach. So the Ministry of Water is having a very big problem in arbitration, because now the scarcity means that you have to arbitrate between agriculture, between domestic water, and between industrial water. So the creation of this agency, which will be linked directly to the Prime Minister, we hope with this we will get a strong body to improve this integrated water management. The second idea I will focus on is the use of technology. To use more technology in the water sector. I recognize that Morocco has some progress to do in this field, And when I say use more technology, I can give the example of buildings. In buildings, you can now introduce many little techniques, but that can improve the economy of water and to lower down the consumption. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsef. And I want to take that last point to make a question to Cécile. To what extent this kind of monitoring of human impact on marine ecosystem or water ecosystem can improve the efficient use of these resources, and what kind of experience do you have in France, for example, or different kind of results that you have seen?
Okay, so I think it's really important to increase the number of nature-based solutions, and for example the marine protected areas. And if we want to succeed in this goal, we have to get all parties, the commitment of all parties. So that means that we have to involve, from the beginning, we have to involve for example, small industries, so fishermen, but also local communities and local authorities, of course. And it's really important to work together and to have also the government of these marine protected areas, because we want them to be fully protected, or at least highly protected. So it's really important to have everybody engaged and the commitment of all the parties. So we are in this way in France. So we have some MPAs that will be created in the next few years, following years. In the Mediterranean Sea, and it's the same for land and for fresh water also resource, and of course the fresh water and seawater are linked. So it's really important to have everything connected, and of course it's related also to law, and we have. To be sure that these protected areas are well managed and well governed to be able to protect them. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cécile. I don't know if someone inside the public has a question or not. Well, you, Krista?
Thank you for your presentations. My question goes to maybe to you two. I understand international law can be really important to tackle the issue of diversity. Of inequalities between countries to access of water. I would like, and you talk about also problems of access within a given country. There are some countries where it works well, others where maybe the government may have difficulties to reduce this inequality. So my question is, do you think that international law can also help to tackle the issues of inequalities within a country, so somehow to force countries to tackle these issues?
Thank you for this question. First of all, indeed, international law has been developed in order to consider this kind of question at the interstate level. So the question is now, what are the international obligations for states to consider this kind of challenges inside the country? And international law is much more limited. This is precisely what I intended to explain in this dimension, because international water law has been developed in order to regulate the relations between states, which are riparian states of shared water courses, let's say. The international law is getting developed, but very slowly and through let's say, soft law approach, and this is the point. The core element, in my opinion, to answer your question, is the so-called right to water. It has been promoted by the United Nations General Assembly in a very strong resolution adopted in 2007. Only 4 states voted against, with a few abstentions. And even the 4 states that voted against have changed their mind in the following years. So this means that there is a strong commitment on the political plane to support this right to water thing. But the problem is implementation. Once you have stated it's important to promote a right to water, meaning all the people inside the country deserve the same access to water, quality, quantity of water. Once it is said, you have then to implement that, to apply the rule. One key element is the protocol, 2005 protocol I mentioned, because this is the one and only binding legal instruments that translate this right to water approach into specific, well-defined, let's say, provisions and obligations for states. But there are only 27 states that have ratified it. So once again, it means that there is a lot to do. We have soft law. You should give access to all the people through an equity approach. But states are not bound by an explicit, let's say, a mandatory rule. That's the next step in my opinion, and that's why I consider that if at the global level the water security approach is promoted and developed, then we will have to reinforce this legal dimension of the right to water. Is the answer to your question clear?
So hi everybody, my name is Dexita. I work for, oh wow, the music. I work for NG, an independent power and water producer. And I compliment, it's actually more of a comment rather than a question, but I compliment what Monsef and the lady has mentioned. It should be a public-private partnership to engage in ensuring water scarcity is minimized to reasonable levels. And I say this is because we all know that climate impacts are going to only be exacerbated much more in the coming years. We already start to see that in regions such as the Gulf region and a bit of Africa, where it's now become high-risk zones for water scarcity. And that's why solutions like green desalination are the new norms of the future to promote accessibility and affordability for populations. But why I say it's a public-private partnership is because, yes, we invest in governments to support that green desalination, but at the same time, it doesn't just stop there. It's the responsibility of the private sector to also promote nature-based solutions and not just say, I stop at this point and wait for governments to put in regulations, because we all know that may not come in years to come, and we're all sitting in an equation where we can't wait anymore. So it definitely needs the public-private engagement and partnerships to address the water scarcity and affordability.
Thank you for your comment. I forget your name, or I did her.
It's Dexita.
Dexita, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking in another question after your comment, and often we have a kind of inequality also, I don't want to say between north and south, but at least between the origin of the investment and the place where the investment arrived. And usually you have some commitment of the industry in their own country when they are a developed country, but they don't use these same rules, at least in the underdevelopment or country that are growing through a development path, and they do not respect elemental rules. So What can, again, the lawyer, what do you think about that?
Thank you for this question, because it reveals that something was lacking, was missing in one of my slides when I was exposing the branches of international which are concerned. International investment law is also relevant, you're right. And this is a question that concerns international investment law, which regulates the links, the relations between the states which receive an investment and the private investor as such. And if, theoretically, let's say, once again this is law, if the investor do not respect the laws of the domestic states, then it should be responsible according to international investment law on the international plane. So theoretically there is a solution of this kind, but the problem is once again a question of force, the level of force of the respective partners, a developing state and a potentially strong investor from a developed country. In many cases, the developing states will not say anything about the behavior of the investor in order not to create more troubles than these violations already generate, let's say. So this is a question, an answer about realpolitik.
But sorry, I have to add a comment on that one. I mean, as an investor in countries, developing countries as well, it is national law that we have to follow. Over and above, yes, we have, as a French organization, we have duty of vigilance, the EU taxonomy that places additional onuses on major investors. And also you have the whole ESG frameworks that are placing the soft law is now, which is becoming the hard law. So I have a reservation on that big investors are not really a bit flexible and adaptability when it comes to local laws. Yes, in certain countries there's maybe strong absence of it, and that's where there's the gray areas. But I think now, as we see more and more of the ESG frameworks, more and more of the taxonomies that are coming to play, that places greater onuses on investors.
Yes, absolutely. The aim was not to say that all investors do not respect or violate law, but I was just answering the questions about when they violate. But you're right, soft law is very important in this context.
So I have a question for the two speakers on this side. I'm looking at the IPCC logo, and I'm just wondering about the use of projections in your work as you're thinking about the challenges in the places that you're facing, and especially the dependency of the solutions on 1.5 versus 2 degrees versus other other pathways that we might be facing.
Yes, I think I mentioned that in my presentation, and we are absolutely now aware of the fact that we will get less and less water from Allah, from the God. So we are, that's why we are putting a lot of money on desalination. Unfortunately, because personally I don't like this source of water. And in parallel, we are preparing a lot of awareness campaign toward individuals, toward the industry, toward farmers, to reduce their consumption. I would like, if I have the micro, to react to the international side. You were saying that, to say that for the Morocco case, we are very fortunate. All our water resources comes from Morocco. We don't share any water resource with other countries. This is a good thing. But the scarcity of water is now creating a specific problem. I mean that we have developed agriculture, irrigation, and 80% of water resources is going to agriculture, and a big part of these agriculture products are being exported. So many people now are saying you are exporting water. Leave the water for the for people, for poor people. So this is one of the challenges we have to deal about in the future. The second point I would like to react on from the ladies from NG, you say yes, is that in Morocco it has been very easy to attract private investment in energy sector, and NG is present in Morocco, of course, because you say the return of investment in English, retour sur investissement, is easier than in water. In water, prices are very, very low. Water has been subsidized, of course, for decades. But all what I said about desalination will be done by private sector. And for that, we have amended our PPP law to make it more attractive for international investor. And I think NG is now focusing on Casablanca desalination water plant. Thank you.
And to answer your question, so I think that nature is a powerful tool to tackle climate change. And we know that, for example, MPAs can foster biodiversity, and in fully protected areas we have 45% more biodiversity and biomass than in other areas. And we know also that healthy marine ecosystems can sequester a lot of carbon. So it's also a key to be able to tackle climate change. So I don't know in the following years if marine protected areas will be able to contribute to the 1.5. I'm sure they are, but I don't know in what amount. But I'm sure that we need more marine protected areas, and we need more fully protected areas. So that means that we have to decide the government, and we have to decide the management of these MPAs, and to do that we have to be sure to fully get the commitment of all parties. Yeah, that's the key.
Thank you very much. We're going to close our panel, and I would like to invite all the public to take a pictures all together for our streaming and Twitter. Thank you. So I invite you, all of you. Yes, we are going to do now. We did this last week. It works a lot. Et depuis les réseaux sociaux, ils nous ont demandé, je te jure, oui, oui. Come on, come on. Non, non, je te jure, ça a marché. That works. Thank you very much for this global picture. See you soon.
Ok, gracias a todos. Cierro.